May 2002, and a new day dawns for the world of soccer. For the first time, the World Cup comes to Asia. And for the first time, two nations co-host the world's favourite tournament. Almost 200 nations started out on the journey, but only 32 arrived. After a glorious qualifying campaign, Ireland was amongst them, back on the world's biggest stage.
I suppose the first one I remember would be 1990. Obviously, with Ireland being involved, I think it was the first World Cup they were involved in. So I remember all the games there, whether watching them at home with the family or watching them in the pub with the family. It was a great experience.
The buzz was really on by then, having had 88, and then suddenly we were at a World Final. You know, it went so quickly that you look back and you think, my gosh, yeah, because people bring up different stories about it. But as a young lad, I probably was guilty of not enjoying it as much as I should have, and it went past us quickly, and you know, the memories aren't there for me. I'm amazed, you know, that I got to a World Cup at 35, and in the month or two beforehand, I really wanted to enjoy every bit of it and to have as much positive memories as I could.
Every young lad's dream was to play for the country, and then to play in the World Cup for your country is just the pinnacle of anyone's career. So there was a lot of young lads in the squad this time, and I'm sure it was one of the greatest experiences of their lives. It certainly was for me.
2 weeks before the tournament began, the Irish squad bustled their way out of Dublin Airport. Home for the next 10 days would be Saipan, a small tropical island in the Pacific Ocean. A place with a troubled past. It was from an airstrip here that the Enola Gay took off to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima in World War II. It was a long way to go for such poor omens.
I think the logic was that the team would have a few days rest and recreation in a place where nobody cared much about football. They'd get used to heat and they'd bond a bit, and then they'd move on to the World Cup. The defects in that logic were that it was a 23-hour journey to get there, and you know, everybody was grumpy for the first few days, which had its own ramifications.
Ireland skipper Roy Keane has been sent home from the World Cup. This has been confirmed by manager Mick McCarthy at a news conference in Saipan within the past hour.
Paradise found and paradise lost. What began as a tremor developed into the largest earthquake Irish soccer had ever known. Frustrations about facilities bubbled over into a training ground row, and Roy Keane announced his intention to go home. Overnight, he had a change of mind, but not a change of heart.
A lot of people say, well, it's typical of Roy, and Roy should really shut up, but I can't, especially if I'm captain of the team. We come over here, we travel halfway across the world, and the training pitch is a disgrace. And somebody's got to hold a hand up and say, it's like training on a car park, bloody rock hard. We've had 1 or 2 injuries already, and I expect a few more. And that's my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. Now, as I said, all I want is best, and if that's a crime, well, then I'm guilty. Football's a hard game. You need to help yourself, and I don't think we do sometimes. Far from it. And as I said, I've just come to the end of the road regarding working with certain people, and I've had enough.
Hardly the words of a happy man. Transcripts of the interviews reached Mick McCarthy, and in a squad meeting that followed, diplomacy collapsed.
I think it probably seemed like an ambush to Roy Keane. The team went into this little room behind the restaurant in the hotel. Roy would have been, you know, for want of another word, confronted with the Irish Times article. And I think as a captain and a senior player, he reacted badly to the prospect of having to explain himself in front of other players and the staff associated with the team. We seemed to go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly in terms of, you know, people abusing each other, and while Roy might have viewed it as an ambush, he seems to have had the element of surprise on his side in terms of the vehemence he attacked Mick McCarthy with, and he seems to have had the floor to himself for a good 5 to 6 minutes anyway.
Will not tolerate, not being spoken to like that, but the level of abuse that was thrown at me. So I have sent him home.
I've never witnessed anything like that in my life. And you know, there is a line, you can't cross it, and unfortunately Roy has crossed it.
The next day, the Irish squad left Saipan and headed for their next base, Izumo in Japan. Their former captain was on an opposite course, isolated and alone.
Roy, can you give us just one reaction being sent home from the World Cup?
I think the team left Saipan and in a state of shock and continued to be that way. This is a guy who got an honorary doctorate in his hometown 2 weeks beforehand, who'd almost dragged the team on his back through the qualifying process. And here they were getting to the business end of the World Cup, and he was on his way home. And it started to dawn on people that, there was no Roy Keane.
Mr. Keane, how does it feel to be back home? Are you tired after the journey?
What's the name of the dog, Roy? What do you call the dog? It attracted media interest of an unprecedented nature, and it was on the level of the death of Princess Diana or September the 11th in terms of newsworthiness. People's reaction to it was not unanimous as it was in the case of Princess Diana or September the 11th. In fact, people took sides. But what's interesting psychologically is that people made up their minds depending upon their allegiance, and in a sense they saw what happened when they believed it, not the other way around. So in other words, if you were a Roy Keane fan, everything that he did made sense and was justifiable. If you were a Mick McCarthy fan, similarly. But the irony was, nobody knew the full facts. But that didn't stop us from taking sides and drawing conclusions.
Come back, Roy Keane!
There was a tremendous human interest aspect to it all. And that brought in people who had no knowledge whatsoever about football were suddenly taking sides about McCarthy versus Keane because they could identify with the type of people portrayed on the screen. Two strong, forceful people, neither of whom would back down.
It's now almost a week since those first reports began to emerge from the Ireland World Cup training camp in Saipan. Captain Roy Keane, perhaps the world's greatest midfield player, certainly the player most responsible for Ireland's qualification for the World Cup finals, was threatening to abandon the side at the very moment he was needed most. This evening, in his first major television interview since his dismissal, Roy Keane speaks about the events which led to his departure from Ireland's World Cup squad.
What happened to me last week, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I felt I deserved better. Now, of course I lost my temper. People will tell you that, people who know me, but people make me out to be a monster and I'm a loner, and that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. But as I said, what happened last week will live with me for a long time.
If you thought that they'd take you back, that the players wanted you back...
Take me back?
Yeah.
What do you mean if they take me back?
If they thought that they'd love to have you in the team, that Mick McCarthy was prepared to bury the hatchet with you, that he was prepared to apologise, to meet you halfway, that the players wanted you back, what would Roy Keane, the guy who pulls on a green jersey, do?
I really don't know. Because I can't see it happening.
It's hurting you, this?
Of course it's hurting me. Dead right it is.
Suggestions that Keane would apologise were unfounded and hopes of a reconciliation perished.
I can't affect the way people have supported either party. I do think to be able to walk in into a TV studio and do a one-on-one and give your opinion and impressions of what happened is a lot easier than facing a media conference 15, 20 minutes after an incident, an hour after, or coming in here last night when people were on the hunt.
I'm a senior player, I'm drained, I'm shattered. How do you think the young lads are? One of them today, when we issued this statement, we walked onto the bus training, one of the young lads, who I won't name, said, I watched the World Cup in 1990, I always wanted to be it. Is this it? And I think it's reached the end now. The players, especially the younger players, can't take any more. It had to come to this. And I'm just so devastated because we came so very close to getting Roy out here. He'll never
When we look at the Keane-McCarthy conflict, it appears that there was a time when all that was required was merely a phone call and the problem would have been resolved. And it's a pity that phone call wasn't made. That's clear at the outset. But the solution sometimes can appear simple, but when you've got emotion deeply invested in it, then it's not easy for that solution to emerge.
Leading up to Japan, obviously, it wasn't great, especially in Saipan, all the troubles going on. So I'd say, speaking for myself, and I'd say Robbie as well, we didn't really enjoy that. We were just here to play football, and obviously that wasn't a nice experience. But once we got to Japan, all we were doing was concentrating on our football, and they're a great set of lads, and if anything it did bring us together, and I think it showed in the performances on the pitch when the tournament finally did start.
Ireland! Ireland! A change in location brought a lift in the mood. The Irish squad mixed with the locals and took heart from the welcome. After the storms of Saipan, the clouds began to part and football moved slowly to the centre again.